welcome to Fish and Rice, Stories from Japan. I'm Toby.
I'm Andre.
And today we have a new guest on the show, Jacky. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Jacky, you're a professional coffee roaster, you're a barista and a QS grader here in Japan. You've been here for quite a few years and we want to hear all about it because coffee culture in Japan is really popular. It's changing fast and it's influencing how coffee is consumed also around the world.
Yeah.
So before we dive into all the coffee related talk today, maybe could you introduce yourself a little bit more to our listeners?
Yeah. So my name's Jacky. I'm from San Diego, California. I'm 27 years old. I've been living in Japan since 2019. It's like maybe 5 months before COVID. I moved here.
Oh, that's a good timing, huh?
Yeah. It depends on how you look at it, I guess. Yeah. But, in all things considered, I think the timing was, good considering like my life.
Why did you decide to move to Japan at that time?
Yeah, so I had just graduated. I had graduated from college a year before. And one of my best friends from high school was living in Osaka. I really wanted to try living outside of California because since I graduated, I'd lived in 2 cities. So that was San Diego and Santa Cruz. And, I was really interested in trying to live somewhere else. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I was working a bunch of I was working as a barista after I graduated. And I was doing a couple kind of like side things, which were all really fun, but I just wasn't really sure, what the best way to move forward was. So, I found, my friend who was living in Osaka, she found this job, that I applied for, and I worked as a kindergarten teacher for a year.
Oh, awesome.
And then after that, we'll get into it, I guess, but now I'm not doing that anymore. I'm doing something else.
How was it for you? California, the image I have of California is if you don't think about LA, a lot of beaches, open spaces, like sunshine. How was it for you to kind of arrive into Osaka, a super dense city, one of the biggest in the world, and millions of people walking around, concrete jungle? Yeah. What was this change like for you?
Yeah, totally. Well, so many things, so many changes. Yeah, I think, I don't know, one of the big reasons why I chose Osaka as well was, I had a friend living here, like I said before, but I had read a few lists about, the cities that are easiest to live in the world. And, I'm an avid cyclist, if I may say so myself. And I really wanted to, live a lifestyle where I didn't need a car, even though now I'm in the process of getting my driver's license. But, I was really intrigued by the kind of ease of transportation getting through the city. So even though it's really, really dense and it feels different from San Diego, it was
cycling in Osaka, definitely pretty convenient. I mean, the city is just laid out like a grid, super easy to get from point A to point B.
Very few hills.
Yeah, super flat. Also, it's called Osaka, the big hill. It's kind of ironic. But it's a great place. And actually, like you mentioned, it's just been voted again top 10 city to live in the world.
Yeah.
And, if one of our listeners is thinking about moving to Japan, Osaka is definitely the place. Yeah. Skip Tokyo, come to Osaka.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That was the conclusion I reached as well. I was like,
You mentioned you started working here first as the kindergarten teacher. Is this something you really wanted to do, or was it a point of entry for you?
Good question. Yeah, I was interested. So originally my plan was to kind of come to Japan. I was interested in learning the language. I didn't really I studied a little bit before I came, just through YouTube and whatever I could find on the internet. So I wanted to learn how to speak Japanese, but then at the same time, my job was teaching English, so there's not a lot of opportunities to speak Japanese. So my plan was, I'm not going to do, Japanese isn't going to be the main thing. It's going to be more, I'm going to get teaching experience. And my plan was to go back to the States, maybe go to grad school and then become, go into education or wherever things kind of led from there. It turned into a kind of point of entry, but in a way that I really didn't expect. Because, ironically, when I was leaving my barista job
in California,
I always, since I was 19, I wanted to work in the coffee industry and I wanted to get out of just being a barista. I love being a barista. It's honestly my favorite part of everything. But, you know, I didn't really like see a lot of maybe upward mobility or chances to kind of go further from that. And I was working for a company in Santa Cruz, and I met the green coffee buyer when I was 19, and I was like, this is the coolest job I've ever heard of. Like going around the world and meeting farmers and, you know, trying to create, you know, mutually beneficial agreements with people, like finding ways to be more sustainable, finding different ways to connect to people, and then also sharing coffee with people around the world. I was like, this is what I want to do. And then, so then, you know, I was in school, I was working part-time as a barista, and I kind of was like, I have no idea how to get to that. So you know what? I'm done with coffee. I'm moving to Japan. I'm going to pursue a career in education. And yeah, and then through like a series of, you know, kind of miraculous meetings of people, I kind of found my current position, or it found me. I'm not really sure.
So now you are the head barista and coffee roaster at a place called Yuki Coffee Farm.
Yes.
Yuki's Coffee Farm.
Yeah. So Yuki Coffee Farm, in Japanese Yuki Noen Kohi, but it's in Osaka in Awaza, near Honmachi. So,
okay, not too far from our offices here.
Not very far at all, actually. Just a quick bike ride.
So how did you get into that? So you had this transition from, okay, I need a break from being a barista, your favorite thing in the world, to I might do a career in education starting in Japan, to, no, actually, I just love coffee too much. I need to get back to that. And so how did you get into it, and how did you start working as a barista here? Are there like qualifications required, or?
Yeah, so... Yeah, that's a really good question. So I mean, I think, I don't know. There's a few threads there, but like, I think one of the big things was, one of the reasons why I really enjoyed being a barista was just kind of talking to people, chatting with people, kind of, meeting lots of different people and kind of enjoying that.
So the human connections.
Yeah, the human connection. Yeah, and I think that's another reason why I was really drawn to education. And I also do roasting, barista classes, consulting, train baristas and roasters and stuff. So wait, the question was, how did I go from this?
How did you find the position right now? How did you start a career as a barista in Japan, where you might have problems like language barrier or finding like these kind of positions, which might be more rare? Yeah,
totally. Yeah. So I think, it was timing. I think I really, really admire my boss. I'm gonna get into how much I love and look up to her later in this conversation, I'm sure. But I don't know. It was just crazy. Like when I first moved to Osaka, so like my barista origin story here.
Yeah.
So I was in Osaka. I knew a couple people, but didn't really know that many people. And my days off were different than my friend who is here, so it was kind of becoming more and more difficult to hang out. And I'm also a big skateboarder. I skate fairly often, and there's a skate spot that I'd met a few people at before, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to this spot. I'm gonna talk to people. I'm gonna make some friends. I'm gonna get a little session in, you know, just hang out. And I met two people who are now two of my best friends. One of them is still living in Japan. One of them is not currently. But one of my friends, you know, as we were just chatting, he mentioned, oh yeah, by the way, my mom is a coffee farmer, and she imports coffee into Japan, and she's been working with these, you know, a few different partner farmers for the last like 5-10 years. And this is her mission and all these things that she's doing. And then we started getting into really specific kind of coffee farm stuff. And I'm like, no one, you know, like he was teaching me things that I didn't even, you know, I had never heard of. Like, you know, I'm like, what's, you know, I'd heard of like honey processing, but like, what is this? Like, whoa, like black honey processing? Like, what is this? So, you know, it's like a different type of fermentation method. It's been like getting more popular, or was. And like, yeah, so I was like, please introduce me to your mom. Please, 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 please. Like, I would love to meet her. I would love to chat. And at the time, it was really just out of curiosity, because, you know, in my mind, I have this current job. I'm doing these things.
You still have your idea of a career in education, but coffee, I like coffee. I want to know more. Yeah,
exactly. And like back to the kind of human element of coffee as well. You know, I've always been interested in, organic agriculture, especially sustainability. And I feel like there's a lot of issues in the coffee industry, a lot of issues, really long history of, lots of, specifically colonialism, like different regions kind of being set up for extraction. And so I felt like there was kind of a contradiction in myself where if I'm working in coffee and it's contributing to these things, I don't really want to be a part of it. And of course that's like a whole other conversation, but I was looking for a way to just learn more about what she was doing at the farm, and eventually
you got into it.
Yeah.
And started working there.
Yeah, and then the timing was wild because my contract was going to expire at the kindergarten a few months before I met my current boss. And I was kind of like, oh no, what do I do?
So
I don't really want to.
Series of fortunate events.
Yeah, exactly. So the timing was just wild.
So I think you touched on like a lot of interesting topics about the farming, the sustainability of coffee, and so on. And I think we can have like good opportunities to talk about it. But let's what I want to hear, just to kind of understand a little bit better. Now you've been working at the coffee shop for about a few years already, and you've gotten to experience and interact with a lot of professionals in the coffee industry here in Japan, as well as a lot of customers, right? How would you describe the coffee scene here in Japan, and maybe compare it to the one that you're familiar with from back home in California?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, because it's like there's a lot of... It's interesting because Japan also has like a really long, coffee history as well, kind of coffee culture and old like gisatens and like cafes and stuff. So I feel like there's definitely been huge coffee culture, but kind of my entry point in California was specialty coffee and third wave coffee. So cafes and roasters who are focusing on traceability and
so traceability means kind of finding where the green coffee beans come from.
Exactly. You're not buying 100 tons on a pallet at an auction. You actually are working directly with this farmer, their family. It's kind of cutting out people in the middle who can make a ton of money, and then sort of separate it from the farmers who are ultimately doing all of the work. Yeah.
So kind of going back to directly from like in a restaurant business, it would be farm to table.
Exactly.
And here it'd be like farm to cup.
Exactly. Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Farm to cup, and that's kind of one of our little slogans. Farm to cup.
So back in California, when you were working there, it was already at that stage of focusing on traceability, focusing on this kind of more sustainable approach to coffee.
At least, yeah.
You moved to Japan. How was it here when you arrived?
Yeah, so that was kind of my starting point in California. And yeah, I mean, also I was really broke when I was first moved to Osaka. So it was like, I can't afford the coffee that I wanted to drink. Despite having this background in coffee, I'm like, oh, well, it's too expensive now. So that was a kind of a barrier to kind of getting back into it. But yeah, I don't know. Let's see, like a big difference in coffee culture. I mean, I think there's a big emphasis. This is just a kind of like personal idea, but I think there's a really big emphasis on who is brewing the coffee in Japan, who the barista, who the roaster is. Whereas like in California, I feel like it's a lot of the emphasis on what is being brewed. It's like this type of bean, this type of process, this type of roast. But then like, I feel like there's, in Japan, it's kind of like, oh, this person has so-and-so background and this person is a barista champion or this person has done this. Whereas like, of course, barista championships is a international thing and has weight pretty much anywhere you go. But I felt like the kind of personality and the personality and like the kind of type of person who is brewing was maybe more important in Japan. I'm not really sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about the brewing technique. It's more about who's brewing it for you, and kind of people might want to go to specific coffee shops just because a specific barista is working there or a specific roaster has prepared the beans.
And certainly that's not true like everywhere, because there's a lot of people who go, oh, this cafe is close by, so I would like to go here. But I think in the kind of world of people who are really, really into coffee, you know, that's kind of becomes more important. Like, oh, this person roasted this on this machine, like that sort of thing.
So I assume that this plays a role in the price of the coffee as well, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that when you first came, you wanted to try all this coffee, but some of it was a bit pricey.
Mm-hmm.
The image that many people may have of coffee is like, oh, you go to one of these fast coffee chains, Starbucks, Tully's here in Japan, and you pay 300 yen for your cup of coffee, 400 perhaps. What kind of prices are we talking about for these specialty coffees?
Yeah, good question. So again, it kind of depends. Like, yeah, I think you were getting into something about kind of, you know, brand power. Like, oh, this person is brewing these, so we can, you know, it's now worth like this amount of money. So yeah, I mean, you know, I think it could be anywhere from 800 yen for a cup of coffee. I've paid
so
2,000, 3,000. Yeah. Yen for a cup of coffee.
$6 to $10, $15 a cup of coffee.
Yeah. I would say like at the most expensive, like, you know, no one else is going to be able to drink this in the whole country type thing. Like, okay, maybe it's like $30 for a cup, but that's like super, super, you know.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
I have once, yeah. I did go one time. Yeah, I won't say the name of where I went, but...
So, arguably, is that coffee better? Or is this really, in the end, like a bottle of wine up to personal taste?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a big thing in the coffee world too, you know, because it's like, if a cup of coffee that makes you happy, put a bunch of milk and sugar in there, and that's the best cup of coffee, then okay, that's the best cup of coffee for you. I think a big thing of it is you know, something is more expensive because, not always, generally speaking, it's because of the kind of care that's put into it. You know, I think wine is a really good thing to compare to because, yeah, things get more and more expensive, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it tastes better, but it's kind of these types of flavors, this kind of profile can maybe only exist in this coffee specifically. So whether it's good or bad is almost inconsequential. I mean, like, in my opinion, generally speaking, we do our best to make that coffee taste really good, but it's also, I think there's you know, something about
factors.
Yeah, a lot of factors. And I think a big thing too is, just, okay, this is super rare, so let's try this. And sometimes it's really good, and other times it's like, you know, I'm glad I had it. I'm glad I tried this.
Do you have any example of something like that?
Yeah, something specific. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's this kind of fermentation method that's been getting more and more popular recently, where I forget exactly what it's called, but basically, so coffee's a fruit, right?
Yes.
So in order to get the seed out of the coffee, in order to be roastable, the cherry has to be fermented. And so there's a lot of different ways you can ferment that cherry, but a method that's been getting more and more popular is mixing that cherry in with other fruits. So up until now, generally speaking, it's been separated, only coffee cherries. But, you know, someone might put strawberries, or they might age it in, or not age, but they might ferment it in this type of container, or, you know, that sort of thing. So I think a lot of people think, oh, if you ferment it with blueberries, it's going to taste like blueberries, which isn't necessarily true. Like, I think there's different enzymes and different sugars that are present in those berries that may contribute to creating a particular flavor profile. But I mean, I don't know. It's like, I don't want to say hype, because I think it's really cool that people are pushing the envelope and trying different things. And I want to not even encourage, but I would like to be
open to this kind of change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, open to those sorts of things. So yeah. So again, I mean, I kind of just gave a very like round answer. Like, yeah, it just depends on your personal preference, I guess.
It may be true, right? It's it's like any food or any drink.
Yeah.
If you like it, you like it, and it doesn't really matter how much it costs.
Yeah. I think sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think one of the big things too is kind of, if having a high quality product that, you know, everyone along the supply chain was fairly compensated for, if that's important to you, which I would hope that it would be, but also, like, you know, there's different things to consider. Like I said, I couldn't afford higher quality coffee. If that's important to you, then
you may pay a little bit more.
Yeah,
kind of like paying for organically produced food and
exactly, yeah.
We talked a bit about, like, you mentioned different fermentation processes and preparation processes for the coffee itself. We talked about how some baristas or roasters have a specific popularity, which is important to customers in Japan. What about preparation methods? If I remember, I grew up in France, and if you order a coffee at any kind of restaurant, usually you just get an espresso. And if you want a long coffee, you order an American coffee, which is coffee with a little bit extra hot water. But in Japan, I've never really seen this. Here, there's a lot of, maybe they will advertise the coffee is prepared this way, from my experience in coffee shops here.
Oh, okay.
Do you notice any kind of method that is very typical to Japan or popular here that is not so much anywhere else?
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is like siphon brewing. So siphon brewing it's I'm using my hands, but I know it's just audio recording. But basically, there's kind of two glass. What's the word? Like
containers?
Container, like a vial, kind of connected with another piece of glass.
Looks a little bit like if you do like a chemistry experiment in school.
Yeah, totally, exactly. Yeah, it's totally the chemistry experiment. And so there's a kind of heat element underneath it. It boils this water, it pulls it up into the upper chamber, mixes in with the coffee, and then that seeps down. And then you have like a drinkable coffee, which I had only seen in San Francisco I saw it in San Francisco, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. So that was probably, 5-6 years ago, and I'd never seen a siphon in person. But then I came to Japan, and wow, there's all these local cafes, and they all use the siphon method, and it's really popular. And yeah, I mean, I think, it's also convenient. Like, you can kind of set it up and talk to a customer while you're doing it, which is a huge plus for customer service, I think. And it makes really good coffee. It can get kind of hot, so depending on what type of beans you're brewing, like, that's something to consider. But
so now that you've been dealing with this kind of slightly different culture here, how has this influenced your own approach to coffee? You learned the basics of the working as a barista back in California. Now you're doing it here in Osaka. Has this changed your approach to how you like to brew coffee? What kind of coffee you want to serve? And
I think, that's interesting. Yeah, because I think when I first got into coffee, I've felt a lot of insecurity about, am I good enough at this? Am I able to brew this correctly? And so I think because of that, I took it really, really seriously, at home. Like, okay, I have the scale, I have the timer, like, I'm changing my grinder settings. Like, okay, these beans are this, I'm keeping it this way. And I think maybe it's just I'm getting older too, but just kind of basing your approach or brewing method to the situation, So if you're with your friends camping, maybe you pour in 20 extra milliliters of water and like, all right, well, now there's more to share. Like, okay, maybe it's like watered down a little bit or something. Another thing, so I do consulting as well, and kind of understanding what type of coffee the customer expects in that kind of cafe situation, and then also the capacity of the barista, right? Because if their main job is a barista, that totally changes the conversation. But if they just happen to have a coffee machine and their main job is something else, I can't really, I would hope, but I can't necessarily expect that person is going to get super, super into it. So it's important to, I think, kind of base what type of coffee is being brewed on the expectations and the situation. So I think I've gotten better about that. So
kind of basically knowing who you're serving for and what is the context you're serving in.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Personally, yeah.
And so in the shop you're working at, Yuki Coffee Farm, you also roast the coffee. So you mentioned earlier in the conversation actually that she's a actual coffee farmer and she's working with different farms back in Indonesia.
Yes.
So does your coffee shop only serve coffee from Indonesia?
So generally speaking, we serve only coffee from Indonesia. We focus on only importing micro lot specialty coffees from Indonesia. Specifically, we have our main partner farm, which is in Bali. We also have a few other farmers who are based in Java, also Sumatra. And then kind of depending on the year, we have different kind of collaborations with other farmers who we get into contact with, or they contact us. So when we do blends for other people, sometimes we add something else, but 99% of the time it's Indonesian coffee, and it's all the coffee that we're importing.
Is this coffee that's popular in Japan? I mean, coffee is produced in quite a lot of countries in the world. Come to mind Ethiopia, Kenya, or some Central American. How does Indonesian coffee here is it perceived here in Japan?
Another great question. So coming from my background in California, and this was something I was totally not even conscious of. Like, okay, so we have African coffees and they have this type of flavor profile. We have Central and Latin American coffees and they have this type of roast, this type of flavor profile. And then we have coffees from Asia and they have this type of flavor profile. And for whatever reason, whatever we decide to attribute it to, the image of quality of specifically like Indonesian, Vietnamese coffees is much lower than other places. And there's a huge number of factors. Sometimes people say, oh, well, the mountains are too low. Like there's not enough not enough high altitude farms. But, there's a lot of things to consider. And I think slowly the image of specifically Indonesian coffee is changing, because that's one of the missions of my boss and that I hope I'm contributing to, is that, hey, like there's a lot of really amazing coffees that we can have from Indonesia, and it's going to totally blow your mind because it doesn't taste like what you would typically associate with an Indonesian coffee. Like people talk about like mandolin and that sort of thing, but it's totally different.
So how do you prepare this coffee to really make it stand out? How do you roast it so that it really gets all these flavors?
Yeah, it's great. Another great question. Yeah, I think, well, so one of the big things is kind of, again, it's about that bean specifically. It depends on the processing method, the way it was fermented, how old the beans are. We also check moisture content in the beans every time we roast, and for storage. So I think it's really about trial and error. And then also, so let's say if I'm approaching a new coffee, okay, I had this coffee last year, it tasted this way. I'm going to try it one time with the exact same approach. Try it. Oh, you know what? I didn't really like the way this came out. I didn't really like the way this came out. So try to change it based on that. Without getting into a whole tangent on like roasting. I think it just depends on, again, who you're serving it to, and what kind of potential flavors exist in that coffee when you're already receiving it, and just trying to bring them out and highlight them.
Do you notice any kind of general preference from the Japanese public in terms of what kind of roast they like?
From the general public?
If I may compare the image of coffee when I grew up again in France, very dark, very bitter. And perhaps some people still associate coffee with this, the black brew. And, maybe this is changing. Personally, now I also discovered a little bit coffee culture here in Japan, and I got to be interested in these more lighter roast coffees, which have a lot of aromas and various flavors. What is popular at the moment in Japan?
Yeah, so I keep going back to this, but Oh, okay, hang on. Let's see. So with the general population, I still feel that the image of coffee is super dark roast, have lots of kind of strong bitter flavors, kind of, make it a little bit more pleasant by mixing it with milk and sugar, which is also totally fine. Like if that's how you want to drink coffee, sometimes I do as well. It's all good. Not trying to like gatekeep coffee, but like, I think,
so generally speaking, black bitter coffee is prevalent, but this coffee culture is growing of kind of trying to understand and get a better taste for those flavors.
For sure. And I feel like especially in the last few years, even since I came to Japan, I think a lot more people are becoming conscious of, oh wow, like coffee can have a huge spectrum of flavors. It's not just this, there's a lot more. And one of my favorite things about brewing and roasting coffee is, people say, oh, I don't like coffee. And, if you don't like coffee, whatever, but I'm like, but try this, just try this, And so like I'll brew something totally different, maybe a much lighter roast with some, super chocolatey, like berry type lighter flavors. And people are like, oh, I've never had a cup of coffee that I liked before. This is the first time. And I'm like, that makes me so happy to experience that. Yeah, I can imagine
that's quite a experience.
Yeah, it's fun.
Do you have a few more memorable experiences like this in your barista experience in Japan where you've really been able to not necessarily change people's minds, but really kind of get them this wow moment of like, oh, this is a really nice cup?
The wow moment? Yeah, I mean, definitely so maybe more in my personal life, actually, because I think generally speaking, people who come to the cafe are kind of expecting a higher quality product, just considering, what our mission is. And I always explain to people what we're doing, as they come in. So generally speaking, in my cafe life, people I think are expecting something, okay, it's not going to be just totally typical coffee.
So they expect a good coffee, you serve a good coffee, and they're happy.
Yeah.
But when you're not at work and you get your friends who are maybe not so much into coffee to try something new.
Yeah. On a personal level, like I remember, it happens fairly often, and so one of my best friends was visiting last year, and I remember he stayed at my place. And he's like, oh, no, dude, like I really can't drink coffee. Like,
I don't want, it gives me headaches. I don't want coffee.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, but like just one sip, like just try one sip. And like, remember this look on his face. He's like, what?
This is coffee?
This is crazy. So yeah, I don't know. I like sharing those moments with people because it reminds me of, when I first had my first light roast cold brew. I'm like, wow, this is insane. What is going on here? So
it's something you wouldn't expect if you are not into coffee, right?
Exactly. Totally different from like
Do you feel like being a foreigner in Japan and starting a barista and roaster career was an advantage, or do you feel like you had any special challenges as a foreigner?
Yeah. Sorry, I want to add one thing to my previous answer, if that's okay.
Please.
So yeah, talking about other situations in the cafe, generally speaking, we have the same we have the same blend that we use for all of our espresso drinks. We call it the Utsubo blend. If you're familiar with Utsubo Park in Osaka, it's just right down the street from the cafe. But every once in a while, I'll kind of change it just because it's more interesting for me, and it also depends on our stock of coffees. And one of the things that makes me super happy is when regular customers, I serve it to them without telling, and they'll say, oh, this is different. Like, whoa, this is totally different, and it's not even, oh, I wish it was the other one, but, oh, wow, I can tell the difference. And so it's kind of people who are used to drinking a certain type of thing, and they have this experience of, oh, the thing that I'm always drinking is now kind of different. And, kind of having that like, oh, tricked you, haha, it's a different one or whatever, and like that's another fun moment I have kind of professionally.
Being able to surprise always comes down to the people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so going back to the question I wanted to follow up on is, so you've been a barista here in Japan for a couple of years, and you mentioned that you didn't really speak Japanese when you came here. This is a job where, of course, you're working with coffee, but you're working with people a lot.
Yeah.
So how was it being a foreigner, kind of building a career in the coffee industry here? What kind of challenges did you face? And was it more like advantages or challenges?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I have to say is, I really appreciate my boss taking a chance on me. I told her that I was passionate. I felt like I had a really good foundation of coffee with my roasting and barista experience. But that being said, if you have the best coffee in the world and you can't explain what you're doing, or you can't even say anything, then you're not going to be able to
share your knowledge, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, as far as barriers, I think sometimes people walk past the cafe and they'll see me and they get nervous. And so in those situations, if I'm close by, I'll be like, hey, don't worry, I can speak Japanese, come on in, or, and a lot of time people will be, oh, okay, cool. I was worried about,
They actually say that.
Oh, yeah. They're like, yeah. A lot of the time we'll see a kind of, okay, sigh of relief. So that's nice. Another thing is like slightly anecdotal, but I the cafe is located on the first floor of a interior design company.
So first floor in Japan means ground floor.
Ground floor,
Like
yes.
street
Ground
level.
floor. Yeah. Ground floor. So my boss and the interior design company are kind of collaborating. So they had the space, they wanted a cafe. My boss and the company that I work for, we were looking for a place to open a cafe. And so it kind of was this, perfect meeting in the middle. And so when I first joined the company, I was not even doing that much coffee stuff because we were still working on renovating and building the cafe out. So there was about 6 or 7 months that I was working for the design company, because I was on salary. So they're saying, okay, well,
Coffee is not ready?
Yeah, coffee's not ready. So so then I would get into the van or the truck every morning and we'd go to the construction site, and I was painting, I was carrying bags of concrete down.
The handyman?
Yeah, down flights of stairs. I was installing stuff. Luckily I enjoyed doing stuff with my hands, and I had a tiny background in some DIY stuff, but nowhere near a professional level. And so I think that was when I really had to learn Japanese, because if someone hands you something and they say do this, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You can't really say that. So there was a lot of stressful moments at that time, a lot of like, oh my god, what am I doing, like this is insane. But I think having that kind of push was really important. But as far as advantages go, I don't know. So I think that would, like, not speaking Japanese would definitely be a disadvantage in that situation, because I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. And then eventually, a lot of people were really nice to me, got yelled at a couple times on the construction site, and it was, whether it was fair or not, that's the thing of the past. Like, sometimes tensions are high on the work site,
time pressure.
Time pressure, and, why doesn't this person understand what I'm talking about? So, if you're listening now, my bad. But, I don't know. So I would say in a lot of ways, I think there's a lot of advantages to being now bilingual, if I can say that. I feel like it's a stretch, but
enough to communicate clearly with your customers. Like your team. And
exactly. So a lot of advantages there, but then at the same time, I kind of have to go through this whole spiel with every single person I meet, like, hey, I know I'm clearly not Japanese, but we're talking in Japanese right now, right? So don't worry. By the way, would you like a cup of coffee? So I think there's a lot of, so I don't know if it's necessarily, I think it also helps to like draw, like lure people,
So
not lure people in, but like draw, lure, no, like, kind of draw people in.
tricks them in.
Yeah. I'm trying not to trick anybody, but hey, like, let's, try this out type thing. So
there's one more topic that I wanted to kind of go back on a little bit, but so you mentioned your coffee shop's mission really is to connect directly the farm with the coffee shop, and to have this focus on sustainability. And you mentioned that in the US this was already quite popular, but in Japan up until now maybe not particularly. Do you see a change in that? And also maybe could you clarify why is it so important to kind of focus on sustainability for coffee?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have seen a general shift towards consciousness and caring about sustainability in Japan recently. Maybe that's also kind of a byproduct of the circles that I'm in. So I can't necessarily say for the general population. So I think a lot of people value that, like I said the word traceability, right? Okay, I can see every stage that's gone through, and I think a lot of people in Japan, maybe even more than in the United States, probably more than in the United States, people are very conscious of the kind of situation that most coffee farmers face, which is that, you're dealing with a huge commodity product. It's in the top 3, like most, globally traded commodities. So if you're working in that commodity market, if you're working with commodity prices, it's going to be really, really difficult to make ends meet, even if you're working all day, every single day for a year in order to produce a really high quality product. So I think a lot of people are conscious of the kind of toil and hard labor that has historically produced coffee. That being said, like on an individual level, there's not a whole lot that we can do aside from, daily changes or things that we, kind of focusing towards the things that we want to do. But yeah, does that answer your question?
A little bit, yeah. So what you're saying, if I understand that correctly, is that in Japan, more than in the United States, there's somewhat of a developing consciousness of the conditions wherein coffee is produced and the need for change.
I would say yes, because generally speaking, everyone that I talk to about the kind of general condition of coffee farmers in the world, people, will say, oh yeah, it's a pretty horrible situation most of the time, right? So as far as like general sustainability and stuff, I mean, being from California, I'd like to say that we're trying. There's a lot of ways where it's just, too little too late in a lot of ways. But that being said, I think general consciousness about sustainability in California and the United States is maybe slightly higher, but at the same time, I think the kind of empathy I can feel stronger in Japan, if that makes sense.
So when you're spreading that awareness through your conversations with your customers, you feel like they empathize more with the situation, really on a deeper level, perhaps understand, oh, there's a real problem there. We better maybe check next time where we buy our coffee from and try to buy directly instead of through these middlemen that are basically cutting down the prices so much that the farmers are not able to make ends meet.
Yeah, or even if it's not even a understanding, or not even understanding, but a kind of awareness of the entire supply chain. Just, okay, this is not good. What can I do to kind of alleviate pressure or make this not good situation at least a little bit better?
Do you feel like this is now changing also a little bit the industry here in Japan in a way that other coffee shops, independent or chains, are forced to be more transparent, are forced to really be more traceable with where they get their coffee from, to pay more equally the salaries of the farmers that produce their coffees? Is this kind of awareness changing the industry here, or not yet so much?
I mean, I wish I could point to a concrete example in this situation, but I mean, I think there's a little bit of pressure kind of on the peripheries of people who are interested in these sorts of things and actively pursuing the spread of awareness, I guess, or, trying to be conscious of the things that we're doing. But that being said, like larger coffee corporations, I think that, I mean, it's kind of a difficult thing, right? Because there's a lot of companies that kind of will greenwash everything that they're doing. And it's kind of saying, okay, yeah, we're totally a good company and like we've never done anything wrong and everything we do is really good. And so I think ultimately in most industries, no one's hands are really clean. So I think people are, like I said, on the periphery, there is a little bit more pressure, but I think generally speaking, like the average person has a lot more going on and is not necessarily like thinking about those things too. And as I was talking about the kind of coffee as a commodity product, right? Like, in the top 3 globally traded commodities, it's like crude oil and then coffee. So I always kind of think about coffee as kind of the, the fuel that runs the human the human machines, right? Like, so if we have crude oil, then it's running all of our, internal combustion engines. But then if we have coffee, it's kind of fueling us to work alongside of those things, right? And so I think a lot of people really rely on coffee in order to increase their productivity or, be able to wake up and work really long hours. So it's this kind of tension and balance between who's to blame and who's being conscious of these things. So I would say generally speaking, I don't blame individuals for the problem, but I think there is not so much pressure on these larger companies that I would like to see.
So if the consumers would kind of come together more to really pressure the large corporations for change by kind of wanting, requesting different products, the companies will be forced to shift a little bit what they're offering. That's a quite deep conversation here.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have quite the work to do for your mission to spread that awareness and kind of focus more on the sustainability of coffee and especially Indonesian coffee at Yuki's Coffee Farm. I wanted to ask you one more question maybe for you personally, now that you've been in this industry here in Japan. What would you like to achieve in the next few years? You mentioned to us off camera, you've also kind of passed a very complex exam called the Q-Graders exam. So you're allowed to officially certify and evaluate green coffee beans that are being imported. You're a coffee roaster, you're a coffee barista. Seems like you can do it all pretty much, right?
I'm trying to do.
What is it that you'd like to do now with all this knowledge and the experience you've gathered?
Yeah. So I guess quick thing about the Q grader is there's an international body called the CQI, which is the Coffee Quality Institute. And the missions of the CQI are to create a kind of language about coffee that that producers, baristas, roasters, importers, buyers, everyone can kind of understand, despite, potential language and geographic barriers. Yeah. So there's a thing called a scoring sheet and a cupping sheet, and there's a whole mess of problems that I would also say kind of exist with that. But it's kind of the kind of platform or common language that we have now. So so I don't know. Last year I went to Indonesia. I was there for 5 weeks for work trip, and part of that time was getting my Q grader certificate. It was wild. I felt like I was in school again, just like morning to night, cupping, trying different coffees. And I was training for about 6 months before I went, in order to make sure that I was ready. And even with all that preparation, I still feel like I barely passed. I don't know. I passed, so
you passed.
So it was good. But yeah, it was kind of stressful because there was about 15 people in the class, and I think only 7 or 8 of us passed. And after everything, I was really grateful that I had, but I could kind of see this look in everyone's eyes, not everyone, but some of the other people who unfortunately didn't pass for whatever reason. I was like, wow, so.
Yeah, it's not an easy exam from what you're sharing with us.
Yeah, it was hard, but yeah.
So do you feel like, since this is something you've put a lot of effort into, it's something you want to move into, kind of this exporting, grading coffee, more than just being a barista?
That's another good question though, because I feel
then
like
you'd miss the people, right?
Yeah, exactly. I miss the people, and so I don't know. From now on, I'm really interested in. One, I want to spend as much time on the farm as possible. I got to spend several days, a pretty decent amount of time there last year, which was at the end of the harvest season. So I got to see kind of the last pickings of the year and the last kind of bits of processing and kind of drying process that was happening.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like a dream, because I've been drinking coffee for all these years, and yet I've never physically touched a coffee tree. It's been so abstracted, I think, from my entire life. Because it's just, geographically, I'd never even been to the equator before. So it's like coffee can only grow on or near the equator. So that kind of opportunity to experience that was wild. But yeah, going forward from here, I would like to do more consulting. I love talking to people, like I said.
Spreading the word.
Yeah, spreading the word. And I think, I can't say, if everyone bought our coffee, then everything would be better, because obviously there's a lot of other issues to consider. But I feel like getting lots more like-minded people together, kind of hopefully changing
the industry.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
you gotta set ambitious goals.
But there's a lot. There's a lot of people who are working really hard to change the industry, and doing a lot of stuff. So kind of partnering up with those people as well. I think another thing about the future. Well, I don't know.
Yeah. Big questions. Well, Jacky, thank you very much for sharing all of this, of your journey here in Japan in the coffee industry as a barista, as a roaster. What am I talking about? As a roaster and as a coffee grader. Maybe is there anything that you feel like I didn't touch upon that you would have liked to kind of share? Or do you feel ready for one of Andrew's now infamous quiz?
Oh, I'm worried about this quiz. I'm worried about it. I don't know if there's anything.
Any advice perhaps you'd like to share if someone is like, oh, just like your 19-year-old self, like, oh, coffee is so great, I want to get into it.
Yeah.
How could they get started?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would just say if you, even aside from coffee, if you're drawn to something, I would say pursue that. Because for me, you know, I did go to school. I have a degree, but I also wasn't really sure how I wanted to use my degree. So I studied politics, and so I don't know. I feel like my work is very much related to that, but then at the same time, I wasn't really sure, and I always kind of was second guessing myself. Like, you know, a lot of people see working in the coffee industry and working as a barista as kind of a part-time, for the time being job.
But it can be a real career.
Yeah, I would like to say so. I think, you know, any service industry sector, I think should often be valued, you know, because, you know, not even speaking about myself, but, you know, the people who kind of make things work, you know, all the way from coffee farmers to baristas to anyone who's working in, you know, service or in food and beverage industry and that sort of thing. So I would say if you want to get into coffee, just keep experimenting at home. Mess around, try roasting some stuff with your friends, cup. So just try all the coffee that you can, you know, kind of building up your own individual vocabulary and kind of palate for coffees. Because a lot of people say, oh, you know, there's a really famous kind of flavor wheel of coffee, and it says, okay, you know, these are these type of flavors, these are these type of flavors. But, you know, you can describe coffee in any way, and there's a lot of cultural things to consider. You know, like when we were doing I was training a couple roasters in Indonesia last year, and, you know, I can't say, oh, this tastes like strawberry, because there's a lot of people who've never had a strawberry before, right?
Yeah, so they don't know what it tastes like.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like there's no point of reference, but they're like, oh, but it tastes like snake fruit or something like that, right? So it's like, okay, cool. Like let's find the common ground, and also everyone has a subjective experience. So yeah, just
experiment.
Yeah, just experiment. Enjoy it, you know?
I think that's a great advice. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
It's time for Andrew's trivia quiz.
Trivia. Before trivia, I have one question. You mentioned that a lot of coffee beans that you are importing into Japan are coming from Bali. A few years ago, I went to Bali, a little bit more than a few years ago. And I saw these animals that eat coffee fruit, and then they process it, and then that coffee is very expensive. It's probably known as one of the most expensive coffees
Kopi
in
Luwak,
the world.
Yeah.
Okay, can you comment on that? Have you tried? Is it good? What is it?
Yeah. So that's kind of like one of the second things that people bring up when we're talking about Indonesian coffee. So my company doesn't import Luwak coffee. So Luwak is the name of the kind of cat mammal thing. They're super cute.
They're really fat.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah. They're all fat,
it's
and
animal
like
abuse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And there's a few things in that. So my understanding of the kind of origins of that was that when Indonesia was still under colonial rule, coffee was being produced and exported, but Indonesian people were not allowed to drink the coffee that was being produced, you know, for a lot of different reasons. And because of that, the Luwak was living wild in coffee farms, in and around coffee farms. And so people would find the beans in the droppings, right? And, you know, okay, cool. This is already, you know, the fruit is already taken off. It's already been digested. There's lots of enzymes in here. We can roast this, we can drink it. And then it turns out that it was, you know, there's certain enzymes and bacteria that exist in this cat's stomach. And, you know, we can't really we can't create the same conditions outside of this animal's body. So from there, it kind of turned into this whole kind of, like you said, I really think there's a lot of situations where it's not even just borderline, but just full on animal abuse.
Well, now it's been like forced farming where they force feed them the coffee beans.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, animal agriculture is a whole other global issue for sure. But yeah, I mean, I've had it before. I've had ones that were supposedly like free range, you know, so it's kind of they're living in a kind of much larger area, but it's always kind of sketch, like you don't really know for sure. But that being said, I think I've had it where it was really, really burnt and the roaster did a really not such a good job, and I was really disappointed because it was super expensive. And then I've had other times where it was really, really nice. I remember like it had a really kind of light acidity. I don't know. I think it was good, but a lot of it is this kind of a gimmick in a lot of ways.
Tourist attraction.
Yeah, kind of like tourist attraction, and also the fact that you can sell it for so much money. So
be careful if you're looking and you want to try Kopi Luwak. Make sure you take it from a reputable farm, or from a free range, and don't expect too much for what you're paying.
Yeah, although you know maybe you know I'm trying to promote Indonesian coffee, but then I'm like, oh well, you know, Luwak coffee is like this.
It's a very specific. It's only a small amount of Indonesian coffee.
Yeah, but I think considering kind of animal welfare and you know, a lot of different things, like if you can find one from a reputable person, or if you're in Indonesia and you have the chance, I would say try it. If you can, you know, check all those boxes. But yeah.
Not
but
expecting anything too special.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, let's jump into the questions actually that I prepared here. They will be mostly on history of coffee in Japan. So coffee was introduced to Japan at some point in history, brought by Dutch people here, traders.
Through
if I'm
Indonesia,
not mistaken.
probably.
Through Indonesia.
Yeah.
The Dutch
I'm
Indies,
not sure.
East Indies,
Yeah.
Maybe. And what year or what kind of decade or around what time it was introduced to Japan?
Well, I was thinking like,
what are we saying? Are we giving a specific year, or are we giving a century?
Get as close as possible. You can give a year.
I have a year.
Okay. Wow.
Well, because I was gonna say
pressure's
like,
on you.
Yeah, pressure's on me. Oh my gosh, like. I was gonna say like, I don't know, before like Japan like closed itself off, like it was either before or after that, but that's a pretty like big chunk of time to consider. So I don't know, like early 1700s or something, late 1600s, early
What
1700s?
would be your answer? Final answer?
1721.
1721. Okay, very specific.
I had 1761.
1761. It was 1700.
Oh,
as you said first,
exactly
you added 21. Yes.
Wow.
Or around that time, it was.
Pretty close guess. 1700. That's a good, easy number to remember.
Yeah.
1700. Okay, after that, the first coffee shop, that's question number 2, by the way. The first coffee shop in Japan, when was it open?
First coffee shop
That's
in
actually
Japan?
quite a while later. I think I read that before. I would say the following number or year. Or maybe not. Oh, I'm changing my mind again. This is a difficult one.
First coffee shop?
Yeah, so the coffee beans were introduced in 1700. And then later, sometime later, the coffee shop was open.
You could go somewhere to drink it.
Yeah.
You're not just roasting it yourself.
Just buy coffee and roast it and make coffee, right? So.
I don't know.
What's your
like,
best guess?
Best guess? Well, yeah, because it really could be like any year.
Any year after
Really,
1700.
any year between
1721?
Yeah, 1701. No. I don't know. I'm gonna say, how about it took 100 years, 1800.
Yeah, good guess.
I have 1848.
1848. Your guess is closer. It was 1888.
Oh, Oh, even later.
Wow.
Oh, well.
Almost 200 years later.
Yeah, wow.
Took a while for them to figure out what to do with the bean.
Catch on, yeah.
It's like, we have this, what do we do with it?
Probably that they were drinking the coffee, but were probably like trading, not having like actual coffee shop. Right? And there was a company, is known now also. It's called Ueshima Coffee Company.
UCC.
UCC, yes.
Yeah, you see them everywhere.
It was founded also later. When was it founded? A little bit of history.
UCC. When was UCC founded?
All right, I have a number, a year.
Yeah? Oh my gosh, Toby,
I'm
so
just gonna
fast.
bring it closer to us.
Yeah, bringing it closer and closer. All right, let's see. So it was, you gave us the hint that it was later then. It was after the first cafe was opened.
Yes. And it was in Kobe City.
Okay. 1900.
Okay.
I picked your number, 1921.
1921.
Okay, so Toby's guess again. It was 1933.
1933.
But I still haven't gotten a single one right.
Not right, but
Getting closer.
Me neither.
I think from 21 weeks of recording those episodes, I still have not gotten a single trivia correct.
Exactly right, yeah.
Yes.
Your first guess was exactly right,
Yeah.
1700, and then you
1700.
started moving
And then I'm like,
it
I'm
up
nervous.
and down, and like 1721,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
1700 was
Well, we
exactly
learned new
correct.
things about history of coffee in Japan.
Yeah, like I said, don't question yourself, you know.
Yeah,
Just believe.
Just trust yourself.
Yeah, just
I
trust
think
yourself.
this is every time we do the trivia.
Right,
We
yeah.
change our minds, and then the first guess was closer. So just trust yourself. Thank you, Jacky, for participating in those difficult questions and exposing yourself to
Japanese history of
Japanese
coffee.
history of coffee. And thank you for sharing your journey here in
Yeah.
Japan. If some of our listeners want to try your coffee, they can find you here in Osaka at Yuki Coffee Farm in Awaza. You open regularly. We'll put all the links in the description so they can buy from you directly or come find your address.
Yeah, please come by. I'd love to say hello.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andre, for preparing the questions. And thank you to our listeners for being here today. This was Fish and Rice Stories from Japan, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.